Welcome back to Forum Daily News. I'm Wyatt Sharpe, and this is your U.S. election tracker update. Well, of course, former President Donald Trump is now the presumptive Republican nominee, and his many legal battles continue to take center stage on the political trail. Of course, now with the $175 million bond being paid in New York, a lot of questions still mounting as to what it means for the future of his campaign. Joining me now to discuss, Brian Karem, White House reporter and columnist. Brian, good of you to make the time.
Hey, always a pleasure to be here, Wyatt. Good to see you.
Of course. So I suppose I just want to start out here because now that Donald Trump is the presumptive Republican nominee, I guess that kind of proves that Republicans at least were willing to kind of play into the grievance-based kind of victim that Donald Trump was kind of making himself out to be, whether it be, selling the mugshot on T-shirts or what have you. But how will this play out in a general election context where he now has to win over Democrats as well?
Well, he's not going to win over any Democrats. His hope for winning over Democrats is the straw horse candidate that he has in Robert Kennedy Jr. He's hoping that he will garner support from Democrats that will enable Donald Trump with his small cadre of supporters to, ride him, the horse back into the White House. And whether he can do that remains to be seen. But Donald Trump has a variety of problems that he has to face before November, and it's still questionable. I think it's still questionable as to whether or not he could even be on the ballot come November. But if we're going to do anything first, we got to quit calling it the Republican Party. The reason why he's able to do what he's done is because he's drummed all the Republicans out of the Republican Party. And basically what you have, and when they meet for their national convention in Milwaukee, they just might as well change their name to the MAGA Party and get it over with, because anyone left in that party is simply a Donald Trump supporter. And anyone else who has any independent thought and yet remains to have the convictions of a traditional Republican, they are long gone.
And I want to ask you about gag orders, but specifically the fact that Donald Trump, it seems, is going after, judges and their families in many cases. He's obviously went after, whether it be, the district attorneys in the areas that are, trying to go against him here. So I guess I'm just wondering, at what point does this become problematic? Because it seems as if, at least thus far, he's been able to, again, go after the judges' families, for example, without, too many repercussions.
Well, it's problematic now. I mean, and it's not just the judges and the family. Take a look at what he's done with the current president, with Joe Biden. I mean, he stood and published a piece of video on Truth Video on his Truth Social network that showed Biden, on the back of a pickup truck, bound and gagged. That's probably, if it were anybody else, God knows if it were a reporter, we'd be arrested. If it were you, you'd be arrested. But Donald Trump seems to get away with things that others cannot get away with. So it continues to be problematic for him. The question is, will there be any repercussions for what he does? And in the court case, he could, of course, be fined for breaking the gag order. He could be jailed. But I don't know if either of those two things will happen, though they could.
And just lastly here, I mean, if we look at how Joe Biden and the Democrats fall into this equation, how should the Democrats, I guess, avoid being kind of overconfident that these legal troubles will essentially allow them to cruise to victory kind of by default?
Well, it'd be nice if we saw the president more often. They keep telling us the polls don't matter. Donald Trump is still ahead in some of the polls, so they do matter. What the money does is give Joe Biden a chance to build an infrastructure for reelection that Donald Trump cannot build. If you go, and I've just spent 3 months going through a lot of these swing states where, every vote is going to count. Joe Biden has an infrastructure of people knocking on doors, handing out signs, going to, going to local schools and making sure that in libraries, and making sure that when the vote counts, that there will be people there to take people to the polls to cast a vote. Donald Trump has Donald Trump. He's the one-trick pony of the MAGA party. It's his mouth. It's his money. He's taken over the RNC. If you're on the down ticket with the RNC, you're in trouble because Donald Trump isn't going to give you any money. So those in the state legislature, those running for Congress, those running for Senate are fending for themselves. So that's where the overconfidence comes with Joe Biden. But what he's got to remember is there are still plenty. This shouldn't even be close. One is a seditious traitor, and one is an old guy who walks slowly because he broke his foot. Now, there should be no real race here. but there is, because Joe Biden's biggest mistake is that he's made is he doesn't communicate with the American public at all. And his communication staff is among the worst I've ever seen in the White House. John Kirby is among the best. The rest of that communication staff needs a lot of help, and they're not getting it, and that's the problem.
All right, we will leave it there. Brian, Karem, always good to talk to you. Thank you.
You too, Wyatt. Have a good one.